Thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's a joy to have you with us. I think it's a topic that perhaps many of you don't know too much about, but at least have heard. So hopefully what I'll be able to try to do is to, first of all, tell you how I chose the topic of Gnosticism. I'll make an opening comment, and then we'll proceed to the actual discussion of Gnosticism. I hope that you will enjoy the evening as much as I have in preparing for it, and I'm now presenting it to you. So let's begin. First, I'd like to tell you how I chose the topic, or maybe how it was chosen for me. As you know, as I direct Now Creations, I am very much interested in where we are going. I am not interested in our past. If you heard this morning's Sunday service, you'll know clearly why that's the case. We don't need to look at the past. We need to look where we are moving to, what's available to us as we are able to move forward. That's my focus. Thus, I do some reading every once in a while in some books that are much more future oriented. One such book is by J.J. Hurtak, entitled The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. I don't recommend you go out and buy it. It's very, very out there. Abstruse would probably be a good word for it. Let me just say that the book is quite esoteric, and I'm going to talk about esoteric a little bit later on, which simply means that it's pretty far out. It's very, very difficult to understand. I have a hard time understanding certain things, and it's just as simply out there. But nevertheless, every once in a while, I pick it up again. It's several hundred pages, and I'll read 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 pages, and I'll set it down. And then I pick it up again and again and again. Well, recently I decided to pick it up again, particularly as we were doing the 6th strand of DNA in A Course in Mastering Alchemy, where we talk about our connection with other beings. So in this particular section, as I was reading in the Book of Knowledge, it talked about centers of spiritual growth over the years. It talked about centers of spiritual growth over the years. Specifically, it mentioned the books, which are really papyrus scrolls that were found at Nag Hammadi, Egypt, by a local resident in 1945. So when I read that incident, in a sense, from the Book of Knowledge, it just kind of piqued my curiosity. I've always wanted to do some more work in these texts, these papyrus scrolls in Nag Hammadi. I just had not taken the time to do so. The scrolls themselves from Nag Hammadi centered on the topic of Gnosticism. Again, something that I was inclined to study, but I was just had not taken the time to do so in my past. So I resolved now to take the time to understand Gnosticism. And of course, we chose it then. I chose it, I guess, as a subject for a topical conversation. In response, I read a book by an acclaimed expert in the study of historical Christianity. Her name is Elaine Pagels. The book is entitled The Gnostic Gospels. I'll just hold it in front of you. Elaine Pagels, P-A-G-E-L-S. The book is entitled The Gnostic, G-N-O-S-T-I-C, Gospels, which is a summary of the scrolls. That's how the topic was chosen for tonight. If you're going to pick up a book or just get it at the library as I did, this book is terrific. It's a wonderful, easy read and very informative. The Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, P-A-G-E-L-S. Let me now share with you an explanatory comment before we begin. In the study of religion, there's often a distinction made between the religions of the masses of people who simply practice the religion that they have been raised in, taught within their families and society. They pretty well accept what has been explained to them with very little, if any, questioning. This type of mass religious following is called exoteric religion, EXOTERIC, exoteric religion, the religion of the masses. And usually the religion of the masses follow accepted spiritual teachings. This is what the church taught. There are certain ritual practices, how they worship, and of course, there's a system of governance. So whenever you're talking about an exoteric form of religion, there's always going to be a defined list of teachings, rituals, and of course, a system of government. The exoteric religion, it is what's popularly termed religion in today's society. But in addition to the exoteric practices of the masses, in many traditions, there is what is also called an esoteric religion, ESOTERIC, which is more the spiritual essence of a religion. It's more the spiritual essence of a religion. Less attention is given to creeds, teachings, rituals, worship, and certainly governance, and much more attention is given to the inner spiritual essence of the religion. The inner spiritual essence of the religion. Such practices are clearly seen in many of the religions of the world. The distinction between exoteric and esoteric. For example, in Christianity, there are the exoteric practices of the many people, those who follow the normal religion in their churches, such as, and in addition to the exoteric practices, there are also esoteric aspects of Christianity, especially in the mystics and those that have seemingly a higher spiritual understanding of the Christ. In Judaism, there are those who follow mystical practices called the Kabbalah. Very, very interesting area. Again, the Jewish religion has its traditional Judaism, but it also has the Kabbalah, the esoteric practices, only which a few follow. In Islam, there are the esoteric practices of the Sufis. The Sufis, just a wonderful, wonderful group of people, one of whom was Rumi. Rumi was a Sufi. But most of the people that practice Islam are the ones that go to the mosque, do all the rituals, etc. In Hinduism, there are the esoteric practices of the rishis and the gurus. But for many people who still go to, in a sense, their particular temple, they follow the traditional exoteric practices. And in Buddhism, the very same thing. There is a group called the larger Mahayana group, and then there's that smaller group, the Theravedic group. So it's a very, very interesting notion. The notion, the difference between exoteric, the religion of the masses, and esoteric, the religions of the few who are capturing the essence of a particular spiritual tradition. Gnosticism, here we go. Gnosticism in the history of Christianity is definitely an esoteric practice. It is not the religion of the masses. Gnosticism is an esoteric practice. As such, it often differs with the exoteric practices of many Christians who are quite content with the status quo of what they believe, the rituals they go through, and how the church is established. In this presentation, I will point out first 3 and then 6 differences between esoteric Gnosticism and exoteric Christianity. So I'm going to talk about 3 general differences and then 6 specific differences between Gnosticism and traditional Christianity. First, however, let me explain the meaning of the term Gnosticism, and then particularly how the texts were found at Nag Hammadi in 1945, but even before that, how they got hidden in the first place. It's a very, very interesting notion. These texts were hidden probably between 200 and 300 AD, and they were found 1600 years later. First, the meaning of the term Gnostic. The word Gnostic comes from a Greek word gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, G-N-O-S-I-S, which means knowledge. It means knowledge. The word gnosis thus meant, in a sense, a special knowledge that was held by an individual or by a group. And that's really the essence of Gnosticism. It was a special knowledge that seemed to be held by an individual or a group. And it was not in the traditional line of a particular religion. While the word gnosis has several applications in earlier time, I will focus on the word gnosis, on how it refers to the study of Christianity. And I will explain the differences between the esoteric Gnostic Christianity. I will explain the differences between the esoteric Gnostic Christianity and the exoteric practice. I'm just going to call it Orthodox Christianity or traditional Christianity. It's easy to make the distinction between Orthodox or traditional Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. We're going to make those 2 differences very clear as we progress. One final note on the word gnosis. This is just a sideline, it's just interesting. The English word that most people would probably know that is derived from the word gnosis is the word agnostic. Agnostic. The letter A before the word gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, the letter A before gnosis simply means not. Thus, the word agnostic means someone who doesn't know. And agnostic is someone who doesn't know. Applied to religion, an agnostic is one who doesn't know if God exists or not. We syllabalize the word agnostic, A-G-N-O-S, then T-I-C. It should be agnostic. That's really the true etymology of the word, agnostic, rather than agnostic. So if you're with a group of people and you're talking and so on, and you say, well, there are a lot of agnostic people, you'd be pretty smart if you use that. Just a little sideline. Okay, let's now turn to the texts that were discovered at Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945. In a nutshell, these certain writings present the essence of Gnosticism as they are presented by the Gnostic teachers of Christianity, chief of which was a Gnostic by the name of Valentinus. Valentinus. but they also contain gospels, or at least writings attributed to gospels by Thomas the Apostle, Mary Magdalene, and other texts that were considered to be in the apostolic lineage. Well, the basic question is, why did they get hidden? Why did they get hidden? Well, I think that probably no one knows exactly why. The plausible theory is that they were hidden in the 4th century AD because Gnostic Christianity was a major threat to Orthodox Christianity. I just want you to know that. I think that's how the books got in, because Gnostic Christianity was considered to be a threat to traditional Orthodox Christianity. The 4th century, you might recall, but maybe you probably don't, is simply when the books of the Bible were finally put into a canon by the Orthodox Christianity of the 4th century in the councils of Nicaea and afterwards. So what happened was that with this canon of the New Testament, which was very important, these were going to be the official books for Christianity. The Gnostic writings were considered to be heretical. They would lead people astray. The situation became more critical because the Orthodox Christians, traditional Christianity, were probably responsible for the burning of many books which they considered to be heretical. The burning of these books especially took place in the 4th century in Alexandria, Egypt. There's no need for us to go into a whole understanding of that, but there were many books that were considered heretical. Guess what some of those books would have been? The Gnostic Gospels. Thus, it is likely that the Gnostic scrolls were hidden in these large earthenware pots so that they would not be destroyed. And they were discovered 1600 years later. I thought it was very interesting also to maybe understand the distance between Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and Alexandria, Egypt. The distance was 485 miles. I just thought that was an interesting thing to consider. And within my mind, I always like to try to figure out the connection between these things. There was a lot of other stuff going on, but I think realistically, that's how the texts, the Gnostic Gospels, really, in a sense, became hidden, to secure them so that they would not be destroyed. Who'd have thunk 1600 years later, simply an Arab would just pick them up, dig them up, as he was trying to get fertilizer for his garden. That's how they really got found. It's also important to note that these texts were copies of the original text. They were in the Coptic language. They were copies of the original text. I'm not going to worry about all of that technical stuff, but I thought some of these things would be interesting to you. So let's now move to the 3 major differences between Orthodox or traditional Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. You're going to find these very, very easy to understand. I'm going to mention these 3 basic differences now, and then I'll contrast 6 additional differences later on. First, the 3 basic differences between Orthodox Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. They're pretty simple, but very, very pointed. The first one, for Orthodox Christianity, God is seen as the other. separate. We normally use the word transcendent. God is up there. God is out there. You pray to God. God is seen as separate from the created world. In Gnostic Christianity, the word is not transcendent, but the word is immanent. God is within you as spirit, and God is within all of creation. Traditional Christianity, God is transcendent. Gnostic Christianity, God is immanent, a presence within you. The second distinction. In traditional Christianity, there is the acceptance of sin and the need for repentance, or we sometimes use the word atonement. Christianity traditionally has focused on the fact that you were even born in sin, an original sin, and there was a need for repentance. In Gnostic Christianity, sin is not seen as a condition you're born in, but rather sin is seen as ignorance. Sin is seen as ignorance. And the need is not for repentance, the need is for enlightenment. So in Gnostic Christianity, sin is just considered ignorance. Plato's influence very apparent. And what's important is not repenting, but becoming enlightened, at one-ment versus atonement. And the third basic difference in traditional Christianity, Jesus is seen as the unique Son of God. In Gnostic Christianity, Jesus is a spiritual guide, much in the way that he's presented in, of course, in miracles. So these are the three basic differences between traditional Orthodox Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. There are 6 other differences that I think are very interesting. And while they're not quite as significant as the first 3, they are all very, very impactful. So let's begin now with these 6 other notions that are notable as differences between Christianity traditionally and Gnostic Christianity. The first one was a major one, quite frankly, but just interesting. In traditional Christianity, Jesus was physically raised from the dead. In traditional Christianity, of course, the Gospels try to present that he was physically raised from the dead, that he had dinner with his disciples, they could put their hands in the nail marks and so on. In Gnostic Christianity, Jesus was spiritually raised from the dead. Resurrection in Gnostic Christianity means a resurrection of the spirit in each person. It's pretty interesting. Resurrection for the Gnostic is the resurrection of the spirit in each person. The focus is not so much on the physical resurrection of Jesus as it is on the spiritual resurrection within each individual, much in the very same way, of course, the miracles would teach as well. Secondly, in Orthodox Christianity, only Orthodox Christianity could trace a succession of authority from Jesus through the apostles and the bishops, who were now the legitimate authority in the church. So traditional Christianity always wanted to trace its authority from Jesus to the apostles, of course, the first pope, Bishop of Rome, Peter, and then the lineage to the popes and to the bishops, so that in traditional Christianity, the legitimate authority were the bishops and the pope. Quite a different story in Gnostic Christianity. In Gnostic Christianity, the authority of the Gnostics is based on the equality of those who are resurrected in spirit. Any resurrected person could lead a service, especially women. So the key was not governance by the authority traced back to the time of Jesus, but rather the authority based on the resurrection of the spirit within an individual. And any resurrected person in spirit could lead any service, become the priest or the bishop, and certainly women as well. The Gnostics sometimes would call the bishops waterless canals. That's a pretty interesting term. They would call the bishops waterless canals. The third basic difference: God is considered to be masculine and gender, and women are subservient in the traditional Christian church, still to this day. In fact, when you look at what we call the patriarchal religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they are all patriarchal deities, and the man is superior to the woman. In Gnosticism, in Gnostic Christianity, God is what we call a dyad, D-Y-A-D. A dyad simply embraces both the feminine and masculine energy in creation, much in the same way as A Course in Mastering Alchemy presents. There are two basic energies, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. God is a dyad, not a monad. And of course, following right from that, women are equal. Women are equal in all aspects, including deacons, priests, and bishops. The only requisite is one in spirit. Have you resurrected in your spirit? The fourth basic difference: Jesus suffered and died a physical death. He was both human and divine. You will like this next Gnostic distinction. For the Gnostics, Jesus was a spiritual being, not simply a human being. As a man, Jesus certainly suffered and died, but as a spiritual being, he transcended suffering and death. It's pretty important. You might want to read, I'm not going to do it right now, page 307 in A Course in Mastering Alchemy, page 307. So Jesus suffered and died, both human and divine. The Gnostics would simply say, oh yes, he suffered and died, but he was a spiritual being, which included the notion of being divine. The fifth distinction: the true church is among those who follow the teachings, the rituals, and the authority of the bishops. So if someone would say, well, what's the true church? Well, the true church is among those who simply follow the Orthodox traditional teachings, the rituals, and especially the authority of the bishops. For Gnostic Christianity, the true church is a spiritual church for spiritual people. The Spirit is the direct pathway to God. While sometimes we need to hear growth and development, eventually a person becomes their own in spirit, their own inspired essence. And the sixth basic difference in traditional Christianity, knowledge is following the teachings of the Orthodox Church. Knowledge is simply following what you've been taught. In Gnostic Christianity, the focus is on the light within you, not the teachings of the church in traditional Christianity, but the light that is within you. Self-knowledge is God knowledge. The kingdom of God comes through an internal transformation. The kingdom of God comes through an internal transformation. Whoever achieves gnosis, whoever achieves knowledge becomes no longer a Christian, but rather a Christ. Haven't we been talking about that recently? Putting on the mind of the Christ. So in conclusion, I would just want to suggest that over the years, the Orthodox Christian Church prevailed, as have the Orthodox positions in Islam and Judaism, as well as in Hinduism and Buddhism. The esoteric religions of the few have come and gone. Throughout history, there have been movements of the more enlightened ones. They kind of run like a river. But it seems like Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox Judaism, Orthodox any religion, pretty much in a sense, the religion of the masses, exoteric religion, seems to hold sway. And the Gnostic aspect of any religion is more on the fringe, maybe probably until recently. In our contemporary society, and especially the books that we have studied in Now Creations, you can go back from Robert Monroe, Ultimate Journey, Oneness by Rasha, Eckhart Tolle, Course in Mastering Alchemy, Course in Miracles. Just realistically, in Now Creations, we are an esoteric organization. We are an esoteric organization moving to an internal understanding that we are of the God essence. We are very Gnostic in our approach. But our goal is to be able to blend this notion, this message of the of Godness within each one of us with being purposefully here in the material world, bringing heaven to earth through this spiritual expression. In the meantime, I would just want to suggest as a concluding note, it is important that the Gnostic values of love and oneness guide the actions of those who are in the mind of the Christ. You will know you are and who others are by the love they have for one another. That's the presentation that I wanted to make this evening. I hope I was clear enough and hope it was helpful. to be able to see these distinctions and so on. My goal was to make things clear between traditional Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. Any comments, questions, or anything that you have? There are many, many aspects to Gnosticism. I know a lot, but I don't know them all, that's for sure. But if I can be helpful, and I know some of you have done some work in the Gnostic area, so please, I certainly welcome your comments, anything you would want to bring up. And again, we're on 2 screens tonight, so you know, if I don't see you with your hand, just say, hey, Vince. Sue Simon first, and then Connie, and then Jacqueline. Sue Simon?
Sure. This is the way that I understood Gnosticism, was that self-knowledge was the path to salvation. Would you say that that's?
What is the path of salvation?
Self-knowledge.
Self-knowledge, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, so, okay.
Self-knowledge is the recognition of the divine that is within you.
Right, correct.
Yes.
So then in the Orthodox tradition, salvation, I thought meant that they believed that Jesus died for their sins, and that his death ensured salvation for those that accepted it. Is that true? Is that how you?
I would say that's the traditional view. But
Okay.
there's one other thing as well. Not only that Jesus died to save you from your sins, the Gnostics would just say, not true.
Right.
But the other thing is, in the traditional Christian church, they said outside of the church, there is no salvation. So the only means was not just that Jesus might have saved you, but you had to adhere to the teachings of the church itself.
Okay.
Very important. Sure. Connie and then Jacqueline.
I have to tell you, the whole time you were talking, it felt so comfortable. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, it's like all of my questions that I've asked over the years, you just covered them.
Yeah, I understand, Connie. I'm sure the vast majority, if not all of us, would have no problems identifying with Gnostic Christianity. I'm sure of that.
And is that those are the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
The Dead Sea Scrolls, they are different. The Dead Sea Scrolls, they're part of what was called the Essene community, and they were different than, I would say, traditional Gnosticism. And I don't know enough about the Dead Sea Scrolls to say too much more. I've read parts of them, but they were not so much, they predated Christianity, the Essene community. Gnosticism, although it predated Christianity, there was a definite movement within Gnosticism as part of the Christian movement. So Gnostic Christianity came after the development of Christianity. It became a form of Christianity, although the Dead Sea Scrolls were written by the Essene community prior to the development of Christianity. And I don't know too much more than that, Connie.
Okay.
Just trying to be as clear as I can. Jacqueline and then Chris. Jacqueline. Unmute, Jacqueline. There you go.
Was the threat to the traditional or the Orthodox rules, the threat that was felt, did it have to do with the power and the loss of control of
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of other parts to the story. First of all, there was a bishop who was actually the Archbishop of Alexandria. His name was Athanasius. And Athanasius was a great defender of Orthodox Christianity. a great defender of Orthodox Christianity. And many would say that he was responsible for the burning of the books at the Library of Alexandria. So he, very much so, was one of the ones who was really very negative towards anything with Gnostic teachings. Also, in the 4th century, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And Theodosius, also at the end of the 4th century, said that this was the only form of worship, and any other types of worship should be abandoned. So they both came at the end of the 4th century, which really was when Gnosticism, in a sense, finally had its comeuppance with traditional Christianity. This was also in the 4th century when the books of the New Testament were being set at the Council of Nicaea. This is when Constantine was the emperor of Rome in the beginning part of the 4th century and had the councils of Nicaea. So it became a very political, authoritarian type of structure that threatened the bishops, which many would say had in a sense become politicized with the ruling hierarchy of the Roman Empire. I think that's true. You know, they didn't have the cell phones and TVs and stuff like that, so it took a long time for these things to occur. But I think it was really control. And how much of that had to do with money, power? Probably a lot. Probably a lot. Still in today's society. I hope that answered some of the question, Jacqueline.
So the agnosticism was there first, before it was all set in stone by later administrators, so to speak.
It was not there first. It was there as a part of Christianity. There were many different developments in Christianity. Peter had his following in Rome. Paul had his following in his missionary journeys. James had the following back in Jerusalem. And Gnostic Christianity was one of those ways of dealing with what was going on. And it had its roots in the Egyptian schools and the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle as well. So it was if you want to say, a competitor. It was one of probably 4 or 5 main streams, and eventually it got eliminated, as did all of the other streams, by the Roman tradition. And the Roman tradition became the Roman Catholic Church. Is that helpful? Not the first, but one of 4 or 5.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jacqueline. Chris, and then Tony, and then Barbara. Chris, go ahead, Jim.
Do you know what the Book of Mary Magdalene, what she had in it, or preached, or whatever? What was in there?
I don't know exactly what was in her context. This is what I do know. It was mentioned in the text that Jesus loved her more than all the rest and would often kiss her on the lips. Well, to say that Jesus loved Mary Magdalene more than the other apostles would not have sat well with the traditional apostolic succession. So that I don't know exactly what was in that scroll. I have not read her scroll. I read the Gospel of Thomas, but I have not read hers. But in the tradition, she was considered to be the one closest to Jesus, not the other apostles. That I can tell you for sure. There's a codex of books, the Nag Hammadi codex of books, and I think there's maybe 40 to 50 different texts within it. The 2 most prominent of which are the Gospels of Thomas and Mary Magdalene, and another simply called, I think it's called The Truth. It's very, very, very interesting. But that the fact that Jesus loved her more than the other apostles, that did not sit well with traditional Christianity. No. Tony and then Barbara, or Tony or Patty, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The state for me, the uncovering of or understanding more of Gnosticism was a pretty big step in my letting go of a lot of my previous programming. I'll call it
Sure.
my religious programming regarding Christianity. I had college level course in the history of Christianity. It was written by Protestant theologians, but it was for them it was a pretty authoritative text on the roots of Christianity through the last 2,000 years. And about 5-6 years ago, I still had that text, and I dug into it, and I was interested in what it said again about Gnosticism. It was a thick volume. And in that thick volume, there was a paragraph about that big devoted to Gnosticism. That was it. The old saying, history is written by the victors, seemed very, very appropriate. So, but for me, it was an important, so much of what the words of Jesus, so many of the words of Jesus are meaningful to me. So much of the New Testament is not. And so it was meaningful to me to see that early in Christianity, there were indeed groups of people that were looking within for that which they sought. And that really excited me. I was blown away when I learned one of the points you brought up, Vince, which was the early church, the Orthodox church, was very angry with this group of Gnostics who would gather together and allow women to speak. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, this group is right on. This Gnostics evidently had touched something that the Orthodox Church had left behind, and
Or never had.
or never had, perhaps. Yeah, it was clear that they saw things in a pretty unique way, as we hope.
The great difficulty, of course, is what do you do with a group of people, not all of whom are going to dig into the essence of their religion. Mm-hmm. So, quite frankly, you have the masses of people who kind of just do what they're told, presuming that those who govern the religion, and again, it could be any of the religions, quite frankly, but the presumption is those who govern the religion are telling them what needs to be done. And if you follow this guidance, you're going to be saved. I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden you have another group, obviously they're going to be a minority, who simply feel that there is a direct connection. Andrew Harvey wrote that book, The Direct Connection, which is just such an important book for us. But it's a very important thing for us because, of course, many people, when they are told that they are going after a false teaching and may be threatened with hell, rather would take the safe and secure route, rather than maybe moving into something a little bit more, that a little bit is more esoteric. But I think that's where we've done a tremendous shift down through the ages. Someone made a comment in Elaine Pagel's book. Why did it take 1,600 years for the scrolls to be found? And the basic notion was if they were found any earlier, they probably just would have been burned again.
Burned again, yeah.
And often some of the original papyrus scrolls were used, quite frankly, to be burned. They were used as fuel until they finally realized the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very difficult thing. I just found this as, as a priest, you have the organization which provides the ongoing historical development. It has the structure, it has the organizational elements, it has the finances, and yet it has a lot of people that are just, I mean, they're good, they're very nice people, they're good people, but they kind of go with a minimal response. The Gnostics always look for a maximal response. So you always have these traditions. And I just think nowadays we are really finally moving into the final movement out of the mass religion, and we're moving much more into the more esoteric development. My opinion, just my opinion.
Yeah.
Just a problem, just a concern. Barbara, go ahead, dear. You're unmuted, Barb.
Well, I have to say that you have left me so much better than how I found you. I mean, when you said the other day, a church without walls, I thought, oh gosh, the blinders are off. And this is the most amazing. I'm glad I've lived long enough to hear this. I really am. And I wish Bob was here when I think back, because it's thrown me back into the day when we were running around like crazy idiots trying to find this that could be, take our lobotomy. You and I've talked about lobotomies, and that's what we thought it was going to take. Oh my God. I can't tell you how excited I am. And really, I'm speechless. So I'm not saying another word, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And let's thank all of the Gnostic traditions in the meantime. John Ruppel and then Tony Beard. John?
You mentioned where these texts came from, and when you kept saying the word, I thought it was another name for the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No, these were found in Egypt. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found at Qumran, which was a little community in Israel called the Essene community. They are not the Dead Sea Scrolls. Those were found in Israel.
What was the name of these again?
Nag Hammadi. I'll spell it for you. N-A-G, Nag Hammadi, Hammadi. Nag Hammadi.
A-D-I.
Yes, N-A-G Hammadi.
Okay. My other question is that you mentioned the Kabbalah was the esoteric practices of Judaism.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And I had heard that the Kabbalah was an organization kind of like the Illuminati or something that was evil. Can you say a little bit more about the Kabbalah and how they are and how it is according to Judaism?
Probably the people in Judaism would call the Kabbalah an evil organization, just as Orthodox Christianity would call Gnosticism a heretical group. But the Kabbalah is basically is founded on a general book called the Book of Zohar, Z-O-H-A-R, the Book of Zohar, Z-O-H-A-R. And essentially what it boils down to is that everything is an emanation from God. Everything in creation is an emanation from God. God is very immanent in his creation, in her creation, in their creation. So God is a presence that is within everything. And the Kabbalah is just simply very much in the Gnostic tradition. Gnostic by way of Judaism. That
Is Kabbalah spelled with a K?
sometimes.
Okay,
And
okay.
you'll get a, I've never seen, maybe I shouldn't say I've never seen, I don't know if there's a single spelling of Kabbalah. I was just usually do a Kabballah. That's just what I do, but it might be just a Cabala.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And this is a very interesting thing. Tony will come to you in just a moment. But this is probably true. If you had an esoteric group, let's just say from Christianity, and an esoteric group from Judaism, and an esoteric group from Islam, and an esoteric group from Hinduism, they get along much better than simply the esoteric group in a religion and those who are at an exoteric level. It's like the esoteric group of all of the religions are much more into a non-physical view of life, and that they would probably all just come together beautifully and probably nicely decry some of the other people that say they're Christians, say they're Buddhists, say they're whatever, and really don't practice. Was that clear, John? I hope that makes some sense to you.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Just, I think that's true. I just think that's true. Karen, go ahead. I can see you.
This is so interesting that it's got to be close to 30 years ago that it was always in the summer I would find some kind of spiritual book, because I was always questioning everything in the organized religions that I participated in. And I don't know if it was this same book, but I read a book on Gnostic religions. And then I think it was at a garage sale or something, I've got this old beat up copy of Mary Magdalene's Gospels. And I read that. I know I still have it. I'm going to dig it out and, and read through it again. But my impression from the time was that she was very much a strong teacher, just as much as all of the apostles. And she was considered one of the apostles. It wasn't just the 12 apostles. And that was, just one sharing. But when I think of it, of all of this and this, I just think of it as the traditional as being a strong form of separation, in its control of people. And then this group of people that seem like it's okay to just go along with and have somebody tell you how to think and how to feel and everything, that's easier than the searching out on your own, for the answers within. That I actually had a friend in a traditional church when I was questioning what was going on in our church, when they had asked me to leave, actually, that she just said, I like being told what to think and feel. And I was just appalled. But I do believe that there has to be a population in the masses that feel like that in order to be led to, to be controlled, and to me, it's whether what end you're on, it is a level of separation. However, on the other hand, that we see that, you talk about the young people that are being born that are different spiritually and everything. To me, it's like God, the energy of God prevails, because there is this stronger essence of spiritually led people. It's happening, even though the masses are so strongly, there's such a great amount of people trying to control what you believe and feel. Still, the spiritual side is growing. It's getting larger, so That was all. I was rambling.
Yeah, well, I think that's true, without a doubt. The there are so many things that are involved with these things. So you've raised many issues. Is some church stuff better than not a lot of church stuff? Well, some might disagree on that too. I mean, maybe so, maybe not. But to get people motivated to move into the higher spirituality, we certainly are in a time now where that's occurring. And we are certainly part of what you might want to call the Gnostic movement. But Gnostic, not of Gnostic Christianity, simply Gnosticism as a knowing of who we are. I think we're very much moving there. But quite frankly, I really think the only way we're really going to do it is by listening again to this morning's Sunday service. You have to listen to this morning's Sunday service. You just have to do that. That's the only way you're going to get yourself out and certainly assist others to get them out. I think you'll find it to be very, very helpful. Thank you, Karen, for your insights. These are helpful things. Pat, go ahead, dear. You're muted still, Pat.
Okay.
There you go.
My mother's been gone for about 23 years, but I had gone to a psychic, I can't remember how long ago, could be to 8 years. And my mother came through, and what she said was, and she went to the Ukrainian Catholic Church. She said everything she was taught was a lie.
How about that?
She said it's completely different than what we were taught.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Pretty
Mhm.
interesting. What would be a way of saying this? I know of someone who was a superintendent of schools and in a Catholic tradition who would probably not do that again. Probably the easiest way of saying it. Yeah. Any other comments or questions you might have concerning Gnosticism? John Sharden?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Vince, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this really great presentation tonight. I learned so much. And, as I mentioned to you the other day, I'm kind of steering a lot of my reading and my study towards Gnosticism because I too only had this sort of vague idea of what it is. So it's just really so great that this has coincided with my reading, and you've really done a lot to raise my awareness. So I just want to extend that appreciation.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And it takes time to do these things. I just, with everything else I have going on, I decided I need to read another book because I didn't know enough about things. So it takes commitment on all of our parts. Each one of us is where we are, and if we're going to grow in the awareness, we then have to take the time to do the study and do the work. And of course, when we do so, it is incredibly fruitful. So I appreciate, John, your nice comments, and I encourage all of us to resurrect, to move into at-one-ment, and to get out of separation. Please listen to this morning's service. Chris, go ahead, dear.
And if you know, and not people, were they persecuted at all then by the church or killed or anything like that?
They were. If you were considered a Christian, whether Gnostic or traditional, they too were persecuted. The notion was that when they were persecuted, for them it was the crucifixion was something that was I shouldn't say. when they were persecuted, they would go to the persecution with a different view than oftentimes a traditional, say, Christian. So I'm going to just give, two sides to it, and probably is not really real clear, but I think it's okay. For Christians who were put to death by the wild animals and the Circus Maximus and so on, it was kind of like martyrdom was the key to heaven. For the Gnostic, martyrdom was simply a knowing of yourself as a spiritual being. It was just something that the body would undergo, that you yourself would see yourself then as a spiritual being. There were just two different views as to what being persecuted meant. But to answer your question, yes, they were also persecuted by the powers that be during that time. They were both. They just approached it differently. It's a good question. It's a good question. Are there any other questions or comments? Anything else that's just on your mind? Or
Vince, this is Gail. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I have to thank you very much for the path that you have put before me. I didn't really realize that I was so dissatisfied, but every time I'm on a lesson with you, some kind of teaching, more comes to light. And tonight, as I hear this difference between Orthodox and Esoteric and all the breakdowns, I realized that when I was going to catechism when I was 12, 13, 14, and 15, I would get in trouble because I would be the one that would ask the question like, well, what happened to those Bibles? And what happened to that? Well, why did that happen? And I was put outside in the winter on the steps by myself because of my frankness or my speaking up. And I spent those years in high school going to church with my friends. I went to different churches. We were very strong Lutherans. We participated in everything, and I did it because that was how I was brought up. But I didn't believe it. So I would go to church with everybody to see what they believed in. And, it took me, I don't even want to say how many years, but that was 55 years ago and plus. And I'm 76, and I'm thinking, this has taken me this long to realize who I am and why I had all those questions. And I guess I'm a little bit like the rest of them that are very grateful for having found who we are, and we're on the right path. And I have no doubt about it. And I'm so grateful to you and to the whole group that brings up things that are teachings, because everything you say, we learn from. And I'm very grateful. So thank you to you, Vince, and all of you who attend and speak up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. It's very nice. Nice compliment to all of us. That's for sure. Any other comments that you'd like to bring up? Anything else that just struck you tonight? Were you surprised at this topic? Or maybe are you feeling much more directed that you're really on the right path? Maybe that more than anything else. I don't know that what we are doing certainly fits in beautifully. Those of you that have loved A Course in Miracles, it's a Gnostic book. I just want to tell you, Eckhart Tolle is a Gnostic book. Oneness is a Gnostic book. A Course in Mastering Alchemy is super Gnostic book. It's just there's a lot going on, a lot cooking. There's kind of four ways of looking at religion and spirituality. So, for example, can you be religious and spiritual? Can you be religious but not spiritual? Oh yeah, you can be religious but not spiritual. Can you be not religious but spiritual? That's probably where most of us would kind of fit in. Not religious necessarily, but spiritual. Can you be neither religious nor spiritual? Yep, you can be either one of those as well. which really gives a vast spectrum of the experiences in the human condition. That's just kind of a nice thing to see those 4 different viewpoints. Connie, go ahead, dear.
Years ago, I was introduced to, I think he's a Jesuit priest. His name was Anthony Mello. And I forget the name of the book he wrote, but it was about love. And he said, religion is meant to lead us to spirituality. And when it doesn't, it's abomination.
Yeah, it's those are the 2 viewpoints. Thank you, Connie, for sharing that. Yeah. Karen, go ahead, dear.
When you mentioned the 4 types, it makes me think that, you know, we're all where we're supposed to be, you know, that our spirit, you know, is here right where it's supposed to be, and it is evolving right at the level it's supposed to be at. So, you know, you can be at the level of being non-spiritual, non-agnostic, but your soul is learning and moving forward in its path. That's where it is in its path, you know. So that's where the non-judgment of all beings, you know, is that we're all where we're supposed to be, and we're all doing, you know, what our soul's contract is or whatever, you know. So that's all.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key, where all paths lead to wherever you want to lead them to, Rome or heaven or whatever. But that's the notion that we are all creating beings, and we've all done this a little differently. And you know, but all paths are simply, they come from our creating energy, and they're moving us in a very positive direction as creators. Not always the same, but as creators. Yeah. Any other comments or anything else on your mind before we would close tonight?
I'd just like to say, Vince, that was a fascinating teaching. And, you know, it seems to me that organized religion over the years has just perpetuated separation in many ways. But this morning, your teaching was absolutely incredible. And at the end of it, I almost felt like it was another moon landing. All I could think of was, we've reconnected. We are the oneness once again. And it was just beautiful. And I just remember thinking at the end of it, thou in me, me in thee. Finally, the reconnection has occurred. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And tonight was another part of it. I thought tonight's presentation worked out well with this morning's service.
Yes, it was
2 parts.
beautifully timed. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you for your kind words. Any other comments? Let me suggest then a couple of things. First of all, that we continue to do the work and support and encourage each other, just without a doubt. But also, when you're doing your surveys, if there are topics that you would like to have considered in our twice a month open forums, our topical conversations, please let us know. We need to hear from you on things that you think are pretty interesting. And you know, you might say, oh, people wouldn't be interested in that. Well, if it's meant to be, we're going to be interested in it. We have a wonderful, I think we have around 30 people joining us tonight, which is wonderful. And, you know, this is something that please step forward and say, you know, I think this would be an interesting topic. And we'll see. And we'll just make the best judgment we can on this. Any other final comments before we conclude tonight? Well, may I just say, what fun, huh? What absolute fun. We got a lot more cooking, and it's just going to be an awful lot more fun, much more joy, much more happiness. Makes it easy to say, I am an eternal being of light and love. Thus, only good can come to me, and only good can come from me. And that we are eternal beings of light and love. Thus, only good can come to us, and only good can come from us. Namaste.